My name is Aiyra Zahid, and I am completing my integrated Masters in Forensic Investigation at Staffordshire University. I have spent the last year completing my dissertation research in reporting of sexual offences in the Asian community. Coming from an Asian ethnic background myself, I understand that there is a problem with individuals in this community not talking about the matter. It has become a taboo topic in which no one wants to speak out, even though we're all aware of cases in which this is happening. This is why I wanted to complete this research to speak out and try to answer some questions that need to be answered. There were four main aims of my research. 1. To look at the reasons why the Asian community do not speak up about sexual offences. 2. To find out the effects of sexual offences in the Asian community. 3. To come up with a strategy to reduce the social stigma of reporting sexual offences in the Asian community. And lastly, to see if there is a reason why the Asian community do not report sexual offences due to the police. And if there is, why is this happening? In 2017, the Crime Survey for England and Wales put out a report which states that 20% of women and 4% of men have experienced some type of sexual assault since the age of 16. It also stated that 5 in 6 victims did not report their experience to the police. They also gave information regarding the sexual assault rates in different ethnic groups from 2017. The ages looked at were between 16 and 59. I've made a table simplifying the results. In the white ethnic group, 0.9% of men are victims and 3.1% of women, with a sample of 8,411 men and 9,859 women. For the mixed ethnic group, 1.4% of men and 8.6% of women are victims from a sample of 132 men and 166 women. In the Asian ethnic group, which looks at Asian or Asian British, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Chinese, and any other Asian background, 0.5% of men and 1.5% of women are victims from a sample of 708 men and 716 women. And lastly, in the black ethnic group, 0.0% of men and 3.8% of women are victims from a sample of 301 men and 437 women. From these results, we can see the samples for mixed, Asian and black ethnic groups are not high at all in comparison to the white ethnic group. This could be due to these ethnic groups not being as willing to take part in such a survey. Also, when we look at the results for the men victims for Asian and black, the numbers are very low and nothing at all. This does not mean that this is true for the reasons that this could be based on the samples that were taken and also not wanting to admit what happened. Sexual abuse happens in all ethnicities, but these results show that some ethnic groups do not want to speak about it or feel comfortable enough to do so. A study was carried out in Toronto where women in the Asian community were looked at and interviewed on why they did not speak out about being abused by their partners. The results found the main reasons for why these women did not want to speak out and separated them into two main categories: individual characteristics and socio-cultural characteristics. Thirdly, looking at the individual characteristics, one reason was education. If these ladies were not educated, they didn't feel as though they could speak out. Also, the language barrier. If they couldn't speak English, they didn't know how anyone would be able to help them when they couldn't get what they wanted to say across. Another reason was housing and income. A lot of the Asian community live in an extended household, so often it isn't just partners and children, it's them living with their in-laws and other extended family, which plays a part in speaking out. Also, the income. In some Asian households, the women will rely on their husbands for income. So if these ladies were to report their husbands, they'll have no income to support themselves. Moving on to social cultural characteristics, it looks at familism, so prioritising the family. So if these women had children, they might think what's better for the children than themselves. Also patriarchy, in which the man is the head of the house and going against him does not happen. Lastly, collectivism, in which we give the group priority over the individual. The research then looked at why there was a delay in speaking out and found the reasons were because of social stigma and what the community will say, children's well-being and will the children be okay without the father, loss of social support and who will support them when they stand up, gender roles and looking at how the women should be silent and not speak up and they are obliged to their marriage, and lastly, knowledge gaps and myths, so not knowing what will happen and things they've heard from the community which scared them to be silent. Another research which was conducted in May 2013 to June 2015, data was collected to look at why the Asian community failed to report sexual abuse to the police. The reasons for not reporting were found to fall into three categories. 1. Who the police are and having a view that all police officers are white males and there is no diversity or females to listen and help deal with this. 2. Misunderstanding culture and cultural needs. They're scared that the police won't understand the differences that there are in each culture and how some things in their culture may not be understood. Also, understanding that each culture has its own needs and they believe the police will not be able to provide this. And lastly, trust. Can they trust the police to help keep everything private, as well as keeping them safe when things start to unfold, such as their husbands finding out? The methodology for this research was split into two main sections. Firstly, a questionnaire consisting of 17 questions was created. Participants were asked to participate via social media such as Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. And it was also stated that anyone can take part in this questionnaire. You don't need to be from the Asian ethnicity, because I found that it was important to get a broad response, not just one-sided. Next, I completed semi-structured interviews with participants coming from different backgrounds. There were 5 participants that took part and set questions were asked, yet participants were given a lot of freedom to answer how they wish. The first set of questions I asked in my questionnaire were about the participants, so finding out their age, gender, ethnicity, religion and where they're from. I believe that this was important to see if there was any difference in between how different people would respond. So, would I get a set answer from someone from the Asian ethnicity compared to someone who's not? I then moved on to asking questions about the participants' knowledge in this area. I asked a broad question about reporting rates in sexual offences, just in general, to see whether the participants had a high or low knowledge. I then moved on to asking the questions such as what were the main reasons they believed for underreporting, and the response came back as social stigma from the community was the main reason people believed there was underreporting in the Asian community. The next reason was marriage obligations and gender roles. I then asked participants where they believe the most stigma will come from if a member of the Asian community was to report a sexual offence. They believe the main area in which they would get the most stigma was from the local community and family. The questionnaire then moved on to try and come up with a strategy to help increase reporting rates. Some participants gave ideas such as education, which was the most common strategy identified. However, this came in 2 forms. 1, education as a whole, and secondly, looking at education for the older generation. Many participants believed that it was the older generation that was preventing reporting rates. The next strategy that was identified was that making it more socially acceptable to talk about. A lot of participants felt as though it isn't acceptable to talk about, so that might be preventing people from reporting. And also more interaction and representation from religious leaders and Asian police officers. Quite a few participants talked about how they would love to see more Asian representation at these sexual offence clinics and police officers and just in the community as a whole. They'd feel more comfortable talking to someone from their community as they believe they understand the culture a slight bit more. Also, advertising in the local community, bringing awareness to the problem. The last question in the questionnaire asked, would you feel comfortable reporting a sexual offence if you had to? 165 participants took part in this research, and many were giving a lot of reasons as to why underreporting was happening, ways in which we could increase, and all talking about how they knew that this was a problem. Yet, half of the participants still stated they wouldn't feel comfortable to report a sexual offence. Moving on to the semi-structured interviews, 5 participants were spoken to, and the first question was whether participants believe there's a problem of reporting rates in the Asian community. 3 said yes, 2 said not sure. The 2 participants that said not sure were 2 that weren't part of the Asian ethnicity. This could suggest that people not in the Asian ethnicity don't realise that there is a problem with underreporting in this community. I then asked what participants believe to be the reasons for underreporting in the Asian community, and some of the themes were pride, blaming the victim, not knowing what to do, and judgment from the community. Also, a lack of education being brought up again. I also asked participants what they believe to be the effects of not reporting in the Asian community. Some of the themes that were mentioned were blaming yourself, regret, guilt that the offender is still out there, and a hurt in the mental health of the victim. I also asked participants what they believe to be the barriers of not reporting in the Asian community, and the themes suggested that judgment from the community and victims being blamed were 2 of the most common, as well as family not understanding and language barrier. I asked participants what they believe can be done to increase reporting of sexual offences, and educating in the community once again was mentioned. I asked participants what they believe the police has an impact on in reporting of sexual offences, and again, not understanding the culture was mentioned. In conclusion, from this research, I found that the main reasons that were identified from my participants for not reporting were social stigma from the community, culture, marriage obligations and gender roles. And it has great effects on the Asian community. It's not breaking the cycle. People are still scared to report and offenders are getting away with the offences. Strategies identified to help increase reporting is definitely educating the community. More Asian representation is needed to make the Asian community feel as though they can speak out, and just making it more socially acceptable to talk about in general. Also, the police's effects of underreporting can come from a lack of trust and also just not understanding the culture.